Hi Scratch fans, this is Bill Stannard from EngiLearning at the St. Louis Science Center with another of our EngiLearning sessions. This one titled Scratch Lesson Number 4, Social Distancing. And we're going to explore how the COVID-19 virus works and how to protect against it by the practice of social distancing. So let me go ahead and run the simulation for you so you can see what it's like by clicking on the green button first. So there we have all the healthy green cells. And once an infected cell clicks on one of the green cells, it too becomes infected. So you can see how the virus spreads. Well, we're going to take a look at how to build this simulation. Should be fun. Come on along. First thing I'm going to do is go back into the Scratch building area, and you can see the code we're going to be building. I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to go to New. We're going to create a new project, and I'm going to give it the name Social Distance 2, because I've already built another one, so I've got to give it the number 2. So I'm going to hit Enter. The first thing we're going to have to do is create a healthy cell. So I'm going to get rid of Scratch the Cat here, and I am going to create a sprite by clicking on the green cat down here and the paintbrush, which will automatically take us to our easel here where we can create a sprite with our paintbrush. Well, I want our healthy cell to be green, so I'm going to click up here where the fill color right now is purple, and I'm going to pick green. So I'm going to drag the color slider over till I get to green, and I'm going to make it a very saturated green, so I'm going to move this all the way over to 100. So this is a nice greeny green. Okay, so I'm going to click here. I'm now going to pick the circle tool, and I'm going to come over to where that little bullseye is. I'm going to hold down the Shift key because I want a perfect circle. And I'm not going to make it very big. I'm going to make it just about this big. Okay? So now we have a lovely green cell, and it has a black outline around it. And I'm going to change the sprite's name to Cell, because that's what it is, C-E-L-L. And I'm going to change its nice green costume to, when it's healthy, to the word healthy. Okay, H-E-A-L-T-H-Y, healthy. So we have a nice healthy cell. I'm now going to come over here to this nice healthy cell, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to duplicate it. Boom, now we have healthy and healthy 2. I'm going to call healthy 2 infected. And this is a cell that's going to be sick. And I'm going to change its color from green to red. So I'm going to click here on Fill, and I'm going to move the slider all the way over to red. Okay, and if I click out here, you'll see we now have red as the fill. I'm going to grab my paint bucket, and I'm going to come over here and click on the cell, and it is now red, but it has kind of a black outline. I want that to be red also, so I'm going to click over here on the select arrow, and I'm going to zoom in by coming over here and grabbing the little, what looks like a little magnifying glass with a plus in it, and magnify it so it's a little bit bigger, and I'm going to click on the outside, and I'm going to come over here to where it says outline. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to pick brightness, red. Red is here, saturation, click, and now the entire one is red. And I want to put a couple of spikes on this because this is a coronavirus, and corona is Latin for crown. So if I come over here and pick the line tool, and if I come over and draw a line that starts over here, goes through the center, comes out the other side, then I do another one that starts here, goes through the center, comes out the other side, do it again over this way, okay, and then here I'm going to do another one. So now it kind of looks like it has a crown around it and all these little spikes sticking out. It also looks like a mine that they used in World War II that would float on the surface of the water. So maybe you can think of another way of using this drawing if you're going to make a battleship game. Okay, so we've got our healthy costume and we've got our infected costume. So let's put these to work and build some code. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it selected with the infected costume and click on the code tab here, and let's build some code for this guy. Well, because we're doing a simulation, which is a lot like a game, we're always going to start with the green flag, and that is an event. So if you click on events and then come over here and grab the green flag, first piece of code, and you guys know this, the first piece of code in a game or a simulation is always the repeat forever code, okay? And that is going to be a control. So we click on control, and here's the forever loop. Almost every single game you'll find starts with a forever loop somewhere. Now, the next thing we're going to do is, what do we want this guy to do forever? Well, we want him to move, right? Okay, so let's go up and get a move. So we click on motion, and we're going to have him move. Okay, I'm going to put this inside the forever loop, and I'm going to have him move 3 steps. Okay, why 3 steps? Well, I figured that this works pretty well. It doesn't go too fast or too slow, so I'm going to type a 3 in there. And I want, if he hits the edge of the screen, I want him to bounce, okay? This is the way you start a lot of games, okay? So you start him moving and you have him bounce. So here we go. Now, we haven't written very much code, but we want to give it a try, see if it works. So let's click on the green flag. There he goes. Boink. Okay, he hit one side, he bounced off. Boink. He hit another side. We could put a sound effect in here, but unfortunately we're going to have so many of these guys flipping around, you would hear nothing but noise. So we're not going to add a sound effect to this one. Okay, now this is a little bit boring because all he's doing is going back and forth. So we need to add something here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the code. Okay, and what I want to add is when he starts, I want him to start at a random position somewhere on the screen. I don't always want him to start in the same place. So again, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab the code that says go to a random position, and I'm going to put that outside of the forever loop. It's going to be the very first block under the green flag block. Okay? Not only do I want him to start in a random position, but I want him to be headed in a random direction. And there's a really cool way to do that. We're going to have him point in a particular direction. So here we go. Point in direction. Put that in under go to random position. Okay, don't forget, these two are outside of the forever loop. And I want him to point not at 90 degrees, but in a random direction. Well, after a while, you'll know where to look for these things. Right now, we go to Operators and Random. Okay, I'm going to put that random in here right on top of the 90. Okay, and I want to pick a number at random from 1 to 360. Okay, why did I pick 360? Anybody know the answer to that? Yeah, that's how many degrees there are in a circle. So now it's going to go off, and every time I play this, it's going to go off in a different direction. Let's give it a try. You never want to write too much code before giving it a try. So we're going to click on the green flag. Boing! Okay, there it goes, off in a completely different direction. Now it's going to bounce off the corners, and if we stop it and then start it again, every time we do it, stop it, start it again, it's going to go in a different direction. So that's kind of what we want. All right, so there's our first big block of code. Now, because we may want to change things around a little bit as to how fast this guy moves, I'm going to create a variable, and that variable is going to be this guy's speed. Okay, so how do we create a variable? Come over here to the variables dot, and when you click on that, come up here to make a variable. And we get this little box, and we can type in the word speed. Okay, and we'll leave it for all sprites. Click OK. So now we have a speed variable. Now you'll notice up here, as soon as we put that variable in, you'll remember this if you did the lesson on keeping score. Up here it was called score, now it's called speed. I really don't need to show that up here because right now his speed, I'm going to set it to 3. So I'm going to come over here and uncheck speed, and that disappears. It's still there, but I'm just not showing it. Okay? So there's my speed variable, and the first thing I'm going to tell it to do when the simulation starts is I'm going to set my speed to 3. Okay? So I'm going to grab this block, set my variable to 0. I'm going to put it in right up here at the top, right under the green flag, and I'm going to select speed. There we go. Now what do I want to set it to at the beginning? I want to set it to 3, so I'm going to have to type 3 in here. All right, so we've got 3. Now, how am I going to use that variable? I'm going to use it right down here where it says move how many steps. So the way I do that is come over here and I grab speed and I put it right in there. So now our code is a little bit more complicated where we've added speed as a variable. Okay, and we can try it. We can see, is this going to change anything? Not really. There we go. So our speed is about the same. If I click start again, it'll go in a different direction, and so on. Okay, let's take our next step. I need more than one cell. So how do I create multiple cells? Well, I could do it the same way that I created multiple sprites, multiple costumes. I could right-click on this, and I could duplicate it, but I would have to do that lots and lots and lots of times, and that would really take up an awful lot of time, and it's sort of messy, but there's a really easy way to do it, and that is to come over here to Control, and if you scroll down, I can create a clone of myself. Yeah, a clone. I've always wanted to create a clone of myself, but unfortunately nobody at home wants me to do that. They think there are enough of me right now. So I'm going to grab this, and we're going to do it with cells instead of Bill. I'm going to create a clone of myself, and I want 10 cells. So what I'm going to do is create a clone of myself inside of a loop. So I'm in the right place for a loop. And here it is, repeat 10 times. So I'm going to repeat 10 times. I'm going to create a clone of myself. Okay. So that means if you're doing your math, how many will there be after this happens? There will be 11, because there's the original me, and then there are the 10 clones. Okay, I'm going to put this up under where I set my speed. Okay, so I'm going to drag this up, 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 and you see everybody moves out of the way when I get there. So now I set my speed to 3, I make 10 of myself, I go to a random position, point in a random direction, and I start moving. So let's see what happens. Here we go. You ready? Hit the green flag. Boom, yeah! Wow. Okay, there's something wrong. I don't like this. I'm going to stop this, okay? I'm going to try it again. Here we go. You ready? Go! Oh. Well, what's wrong? Can you figure it out? What's wrong is the fact that while we've created 10 clones of myself, they're all piled on top of each other and they don't move. So we're going to have to do two things. We're going to have to put them in different places around the screen, and we're going to have them start moving. Now, we could write a whole bunch of code for each one of those guys, but there's a really cool piece of code already built into Scratch down here a little bit, and that is when I start as a clone. Okay, so when I start as a clone, I want to do this. Well, what do we want to do? Well, I want to go to a random position. Wow, I've got that code right here. And I want to point in a random direction. So what I'm going to do is take this code, make a copy of it, and move it over here. Okay, I'm going to do that by right-clicking on Go to Random Position and Duplicate. All right, so I now have a duplicate, and I'm going to drag it over here, and I am going to grab this, take a look at it, stop this guy from moving, and let's kind of analyze this code. When I start as a clone, I want to go to a random position. I want to point in a random direction. You can't quite see that, but it's there. Okay? And I want to move at a speed of 3, and if I hit the edge, I want to bounce. Okay, so now let's see what happens if we do this and we go through the cloning process here. So I'm going to hit the green flag. Boom. Yeah, there they go. Look at them. All moving all over the place. Okay, if yours is not moving like that, go ahead and stop. Go back. Make sure your code looks like this. Okay, you can kind of see it here. All right, can everybody see that? You know that that's 360, it's the same as this one. So I'm going to go ahead and stop. Okay, so get your code looking just like this. Go ahead and pause, we'll wait for you, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now you'll notice one thing, especially those of you who've done some coding before, that I've repeated all this code. I've repeated in 2 different places. If you can keep from repeating code, you will make your code much more efficient. So I'm going to show you how using something called a function where we do not have to repeat code. A function in Scratch is down here. It's called a My Blocks. It's where you create your own special code. So I'm going to click on My Blocks, and you'll see up here, My Blocks, make a block, click on that button, and it's asking you for a block name, and your first block you're going to make is called move underscore loop. Move loop. Okay, don't forget that underscore. All right, so here we have move loop, and I'm going to drag it down here so we can kind of work with it. Okay, move this guy over here a little bit. Okay, what are we going to have in move loop? We are going to have the simple movement of one of our cells. Okay, and what's going on in a simple movement? It's the forever block with the move speed steps and on edge bounce. So I'm going to grab this guy, I'm going to right click him, and I'm going to duplicate him, and I'm going to drag him over here. So we've now just created, go ahead and stop this guy, a move block, and it's called move loop. Okay, now the other code that was repeated is this go to random position and point in direction. That's repeated in 2 places. So I'm going to create another My Block. Go to My Blocks, click on Make a Block, and we're going to call this one Start Location, S-T-A-R-T underscore, don't forget the underscore, location. Okay, and I'm going to click OK, and now we have Start Location. Now you'll notice here, in both cases, these My Blocks, the first one you see, it says define start location, define move loop. And underneath, I've written the definition of what do I mean by a move loop. Well, I mean I want it to loop forever, move 3 steps, if on edge bounce. What about start location? The same sort of thing. I'm going to go to a random position, and I'm going to point in this random direction. So I'm going to grab a duplicate of this by right-clicking on it, duplicate, and I'm going to drag it down here. But now I'm only interested in the first 2 parts of this. So I'm going to go ahead over here and stop the moving guy, and I'm going to take this forever part and I'm going to throw that away. Okay? Because all I want is it to go to a random position and point in a random direction. That's the start location. The move loop has the forever move speed if on edge bounce. So now we have our 2 My Blocks, our 2 functions. Where do we want to use those guys? We want to use those guys where the old code was. So let's scroll up a little bit. Okay, so the first place we see where we can use it, here is the move. Okay, so I'm going to take this move, right, and I'm going to throw it away, and I'm going to replace it with the move loop. Okay, now look what's just above it. That is the go to a random position, point in a random direction. I'm going to pull this away from here just by pulling it straight down. I'm then going to pull the move loop down. Whoop, pull it down, thank you. And I'm going to push this off to the side. And it's going to go away. And I'm going to bring my start location right in here. But instead of putting it down at the bottom, I'm going to move it up here above the repeat 10 times. Okay, and I'm going to move the move loop down here to the bottom. So your code is now going to look like this under the green flag. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and in this case you have the start location, and down here you have the move loop. I'm going to get rid of both of those guys, both of those chunks of code, and I'm going to move over the start location and the move loop. Look how much cleaner that looks. So now we have our start location definition, our move loop definition, and it really looks a lot cleaner. And you guys built it that way. Okay, let's run it. Let's make sure it works. You ready? Here we go. Green flag. Go. Yeah. There it goes. I'm liking it. I'm liking it a lot. So I'm now going to hit stop. And let's go ahead and take it the next step. When this game starts, I want that first guy that shows up here to be in his COVID costume. Okay, his infected costume. So I'm going to come over here and go to looks, which is where we find our costumes. And I am going to switch costume to the COVID costume, which is the infected costume. And I'm going to put that in even above setting the speed underneath the green flag. So when he starts, he is wearing the infected costume. But when he starts as a clone, all the other ones, I want them to be healthy. So I am going to switch costumes when it starts. Up here, very first thing, under when I start as a clone, I want him to start as healthy. Okay, let's see what change that makes. Here we go. Clicking the green flag and go. Now they're all going around. They're all the healthy ones, and you can see the one COVID-19 floating around. So now our simulation is just getting started. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Let's move on and put the interesting part together. Well, you know what happens during an epidemic or a pandemic is one cell infects another cell. In this case, there has to be some way in which the cells, the red cells, infect the green cells and turn them into red cells. And that actually is pretty simple to do. And we're going to do that in the move loop. So I'm going to bring the move loop up here where I can work on it. Okay, get over here a little bit. Nope, doesn't want to get over there. That's all right. I'm going to move this guy over a little bit. And what I need to do is say, if you are touching a red cell, you are going to turn red yourself. Okay, so if a green cell touches a red cell, the green cell turns to a red cell. The healthy cell turns to an infected cell. Okay, so that I want to keep checking. So I'm going to put an if statement. If you are touching a red cell, then you change your costume to being infected. So I've used the word if about 3 times now. That is a control. So I'm going to click on control and look down here, and the very first if you see, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to put it inside the forever. Make sure you put it inside the forever. The mistake that a lot of people make is when they put it outside, they put it below it or put it above it. You want to put it inside the forever after the move and the if on edge. And what I'm checking, if you are touching a red cell, so if, okay, sensing, touching, okay, so I'm clicking on sensing, and if you are touching this color, so I'm going to drag this over, and I'm going to put it inside here. So if you are touching, now what I want this to be here is this color I want to be red. If you're touching a red cell, then you're going to get infected. So I'm going to click on this. As soon as I click on this, it gives me a color choice. And I'm going to come down and click on this little icon down here, which is to use the eyedropper to go get a color. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to come over here, and you see I get suddenly, oh, look, right there, red, boing. So I just picked the correct color. That's how easy it is. So if I'm touching that red color, then what do I want to have happen? I want to switch my costume to the infected one. So again, that's looks. It has to do with costume, it's looks. I'm going to switch my costume to infected. So now, if I start moving around and I run into a red cell, I will become infected. So let's see if that actually works. Again, always check your code before going too far. So here we go. I'm going to hit go. There we go so far. Oh, look at that. Wow. Not only is that first one infecting people, all the other cells that are infected are infecting each other. Wow. Soon, everybody's infected. Okay. So you can see this simulation is pretty scary, how quick it is to infect people. Now, we can do something called social distancing. And what really is that? I know it's to keep 6 feet away from people, but in the beginning of the pandemic, remember when everybody had to stay inside? That was the ultimate social distancing. You couldn't go out at all. In other words, you couldn't move around. That's how we're going to do social distancing, with not being able to move around. And the way we're going to do that, first of all, I want to change the number of cells that are here so it really works. I'm going to change that number to 100. So I'm going to click over here on this number here and change it to 100. Okay, and I'm going to stop the game, stop the simulation, and I'm now going to click on the green flag. And now you have 100 of them. Now you get a much more powerful view of what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to create a way to social distance. And to do that, I'm going to go to My Blocks. Okay, and here is My Blocks. I'm going to make a block, and I'm going to call it Social Distancing. Don't worry if you spell something strangely. All you have to do is make sure you put that underscore in there. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And I'm now going to grab this guy and drag him down here. So we're going to take our social distancing and we're going to define it. And I'm going to drag this down a little bit so I have room to work on it. And I'm going to scroll here so I have some room. So what do we mean by social distancing? Well, in the most extreme case is we stay home, which means that if we're touching a color, we get infected, but we don't move around. Well, we already have a block that's a little bit like that. If we look up here, we already have a block called Move Loop that has us, if we're touching a color, we get infected, but it has moving around and bouncing off the edges. What if we had something just like this block, but without the moving around? That would be a pretty good definition of social distancing. So again, I want to save a little bit of time, so I'm going to right-click on Forever and hit Duplicate. And I'm going to drag this over here. Scroll down so I can look at it. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And I'm going to get rid of the moving. So I'm going to grab that out. And I'm going to get rid of the bounce. So I'm going to separate off the if. put that back inside the forever, and I'm going to grab these two guys away and away. Okay, so now social distancing is if you are touching a color, you become infected. Moving is if you touch a color, you become infected, but it's also moving around. So the big difference between the move loop and the social distancing loop is moving around. Okay, so now how do we put this into effect? Well, we're going to do it with maybe the most sophisticated code that we're going to write today, but it's one that you can use all over the place. And that is going to go into the when I start as a clone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these guys here and I'm going to kind of clean them up so they're out of the way. And the way you do that is you right click and you clean up blocks. And now they're all lined up over there along one side. And that's pretty nice when you can clean things up so you can work on them. So I'm going to look here as when I start as a clone. I'm going to add some code to that. So I'm going to move this guy over here out of the way. And again, that's just to keep things nice and neat and tidy. So what do I want to add there? I want to add something that will let me choose between social distancing and moving. Okay? So the easiest way to do it is to say if 50% of the time when a clone is born, if 50% of the time it moves around, and then 50% of the time it can social distance. Or maybe we say 90% of the clones that are born decide to social distance and 10% decide to move around. So what we need to do is create a situation where we try to figure out as a clone is born whether it's going to be one that social distances by staying home and not moving or whether it moves around. So I'm going to grab an if statement. But this one is going to have two possibilities. One is going to be if 50% of the time I'm going to stay at home. Okay, so I'm going to put social distancing here, and the other 50% of the time I am going to move around, so I'm going to put move there. So I'm now going to go down to my blocks, and I'm going to say half of the time I'm going to move. The other part I'm going to socially distance. Okay? Now, I can grab this guy. Now notice I'm already using him down here, so I don't need two of them, so I'm going to get rid of one. And I'm just going to plug this in here. Now the difficult part is how do I build this code to figure out if half of them are going to become stay-at-homes and half are going to go out and run around. Okay, I'm going to do that with an operator that checks to see if something is equal to something else. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. And what I want to see is if I randomly pick a number between 1 and 2 to get 50% of the time, I'm going to look for a 1, or I could look for a 2. But I'm going to pick a random number, okay, between 1 and 2. I'm going to change that 10 to a 2. And I'm going to say if it's equal to 1, which it will be, a random number, if you pick between 1 and 2, half the time it's going to be equal to 1. Okay. So you see how that works? So half the time, If you pick a random number between 1 and 2, if it's equal to 1, half the time it will be, then social distance. If not, that's where the else comes in, then you can move around. So let's try that. See if that works. So I'm going to click on the green flag. Okay, now you see half of them are moving and the other half are not. Once that virus starts moving, though, you can see what happens. Pretty impressive stuff. Okay, let's stop it for a moment and let's look at the different numbers. And these are numbers that you can jot down. I'll show you an easy way to jot them down. Right click right here on top of the then and add comment. Okay, see where it says add comment? And here I can type in some numbers. So I'm going to put this over here so you can see it. And the first one I'm going to type in is 0% social distancing. And that would be 1 out of 1. In other words, everybody moves. So it would be 1 out of 1. Okay. So I'm going to stretch this out a little bit so you can read it. So let's try that. 1 out of 1. So I change that to a 1 and I run it. And this is where nobody's going to social distance, because if I pick randomly a 1, if it turns out 1, everybody, or sorry, this one will be everybody's social distances. So in this case, nobody's moving except that one bad guy. Okay. So rather than that being 0% social distancing, I'm going to change that to 100% social distancing. So I'm going to click over here. So that's 100% social distancing. Nobody moves. So now my second one is going to be 50% social distancing. And that's going to be what? That's going to be 1 out of 2. Okay? And then if we keep going, we can get 25% social distancing. And what would that be? 25% social distancing would be 1 out of 4. And what you're going to do is just change this number. Okay? Does that make sense? I hope so. Anyway, you can play around with it. You can do all sorts of interesting things where perhaps after a certain amount of time, if you've been infected, you get well again. So you turn back to green. You could write code to do that. You could make this a very, very sophisticated operation here. So we're going to go ahead and stop now. This has been Bill Stannard from Yes, EngiLearning at the St. Louis Science Center with another of our EngiLearning sessions. This one is titled Scratch Lesson Number 4, Social Distancing. And before I say goodbye, don't forget to save your project with a name that will make sense to you. In this case, I've called it Social Distance. You could call it COVID-19. There are a lot of different ways you can name it so it'll make sense to you when you see it in another 6 months. So bye for now, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks for watching.